Hello, students. We finally made it to conditional three. Now, conditional three is an amazing construction. I personally love it. So it's pretty heavy, it's pretty big, and it's hard to remember. So what we're going to do today is this. We're going to compare it with conditional one and conditional two and see the main difference. Then we're going to see how to use conditional three in everyday life. For this reason, we're going to try to shorten it so that it is not as cumbersome, as heavy as it is in all the textbooks. So stay with me for this next few minutes and you will learn conditional three and you will finally get the idea of how to use it and why to use it. Again, we're talking about an upper intermediate / advanced level English right now. And it's all about small little details, and if you understand the difference between these three conditionals, then you will be able to convey the smallest details you want to convey, basically. So bear with me, and if you haven't seen the videos on conditional one and conditional two, make sure you check them out. The best way to understand conditional three is to compare it to conditional one and conditional two. So let's use this one example that we used in both videos before. So conditional one goes like this. If I win the lottery, I will buy a car. Okay, so this is a very classical conditional one. For more details, refer to video number 1 about conditional one. And the idea here is that this conditional is real and you know what you're going to do in case you win the lottery. More than that, it seems that you have a ticket in your hands and you are telling someone that if you win the lottery, you will buy a car. So this is a real conditional that talks about the future. Then we took the same example, the same sentence, and we changed it into conditional two. So help me out here. If I won a lottery, I would buy a car, right? So in conditional one, we used some present tense in the condition part, and then we used the future tense in the result part. So now we change it to a past tense. If I won a lottery, past simple, or you can use past continuous if necessary. Then we put a comma there, and instead of will, we use would. Then we use the infinitive here. So if I won a lottery, I would buy a car. Now, we mentioned that in this case, the difference between conditional one and conditional two is that in the first example, you have a lottery ticket in your hands and you already have a plan. In case you win the lottery, you know what you're going to do. Now, in the case of conditional two, you don't have a lottery ticket at all. You're just dreaming or hoping or speculating. You understand that the only way for you to buy a car is to win a lottery. But we all know that it's pretty much impossible to win any lottery. So that's why you say, if I won a lottery, I would buy a car. And we mentioned that the usage of past tense in conditional two is not about the fact that you're speaking about the past, but it refers to the idea that something is quite unreal. So the main difference between conditional one and conditional two is that conditional one is real. You talk about the future. You have a plan in case you meet this condition. Now, in the case of conditional two, you talk about something unreal. It still refers to the future. You want to buy that car in the future, but you understand that now you don't have any resources to do that, and the only thing that you can hope for is winning a lottery, which is very unlikely. So if I won a lottery, I would buy a house. I'm sitting here dreaming about a possibility. Now, let's move on to conditional three. Let's use the same sentence, the same example, and we'll switch it to conditional three. Now, buckle up, it's going to be a little more difficult. So, the condition part, we're going to change it into past perfect. Ooh. Or past perfect continuous. Ooh, even worse, right? So we say, if I had won the lottery, mind the article here again, I'll explain it later. So if I had won the lottery, comma, and then we use would plus, I call it this way, would plus present perfect. Makes it easier. Okay? Looks pretty big, looks pretty heavy. Well, it is. So if I had won the lottery, I would have bought a house. Now, what is the difference here? To me, as pretty much a native speaker in a certain way, in a way, um, whenever I say something like, if I had won the lottery, I would have bought a house, I want to put something in the parentheses. But I didn't win the lottery, and thus I didn't buy that car or house, anything. Okay? So, the difference between conditional 2 and conditional 3, this is what we're comparing here. If in conditional 2 you were just dreaming, speculating about a possible future, in conditional 3, you're talking about the past. And you're talking about the past that you cannot change technically. It's impossible to change the past, in case you didn't know. All right, so let's look at these two examples again. If I won a lottery, any lottery in the world, I would buy a car. If I had won that lottery that took place 2 weeks ago, I had the ticket, I tried to win it, but I didn't, comma, I would have bought a car. I knew I had a plan that if I won that lottery, if I had won that lottery, I would have executed my plan. But I didn't win the lottery, so I didn't buy a car. Okay? So technically, whatever you state in conditional 3 did not happen. And it's impossible to change it anymore. Okay? Now, let's look at another example. Again, we're trying to compare these three conditionals, and I do hope that at some point you're just going to feel it. You're going to feel the difference. Okay, here we go. If I see Mary, I will give her a hug. All right, let's imagine Mary is just a friend of mine that I haven't seen in a long time, and I heard that she'll be in town, possibly. So I'm saying that, hey, if I see Mary, I will give her a hug. I have a plan. I know what I will do. It's real. Now, I miss Mary. I haven't seen her in a long time. And I'm saying something like this. If I saw Mary, I would hug her. It's just like I have that desire. If I saw her, I would hug her. But it's quite impossible. I'm just speculating. I'm dreaming. You know, it's it's just not doable at the moment. Maybe she lives somewhere far. Okay. So that's the difference here. You feel it, right? Now, let's imagine that Mary came into the town. Your friend saw her, but he pretended that he didn't see her, for some reason. And I'm telling him, hey, friend, if I had seen Mary when you saw her, I would have given her a hug. Okay? I would have given her a hug. I mean, like, I missed her and I wanted to see her. and she came, you didn't hug her. I would have given her a hug. Okay, so can you start feeling this difference a little bit already? Okay, let's look at another example. So this example goes like that. If I buy a car, I will travel all across the country. So I got some money in my pocket. I'm thinking about possibly purchasing a vehicle. And if I do, I will travel across the country. I have a plan and it's doable, it's real. Now, I may be sitting here and just dreaming about getting a car and I'm hoping to do something interesting if I get one. So I would say, if I bought a car, I would travel all across the country, you know? So just sitting there, but I'm not going to buy a car. I don't have enough money and so on. I'm just thinking, what if? Okay. Now, let's imagine that I had a chance to buy a car, but I blew it, or that car was sold to someone else. And I'm saying, if I had bought a car, or if I had bought that car, I would have traveled all across the country. Okay. But now I regret the fact that I didn't buy that car. I couldn't get it back in the day. And because of that, I didn't have a possibility to travel across the country. So it's a regret. This is the past that I cannot change. Okay? And it brings us to the idea why to use conditional three. You talk about past regrets, you talk about something that you cannot change anymore. Now, in everyday English, we try to shorten things, right? And instead of using that whole big structure, I would have done something, we shorten it and we say would have. All right. I would have done something. Okay. So if I had won the lottery, I would have bought a car. Say it with me. I would have bought a car. I would have given Mary a hug. I would have traveled all across the country. I would have. Okay, so I would have traveled. You still hear the past participle there. So everybody will understand that you are using conditional three. So would have. So now we're going to practice a little bit, and you need to still understand, the idea, like why we use conditional three and how the structure works. So the exercise is this. I'm going to give you the first part of the sentence, and then you have to think for a little bit. Like if necessary, you can pause the video, write everything down, make sure you get the structure right. Then you can turn it on, and I will give you my continuation of that sentence, my idea. So remember that in conditionals, right, we can start with a condition and finish with the result, or we can switch it, result and then condition. So watch out, be careful. Remember where if is in place. So in conditional three, after if we use past perfect or past perfect continuous, then we use would plus present perfect. Okay? So here is the beginning of the sentence. I would have called you if. I would have called you if. Think about it, positive necessary, write it down. So here's my answer. I would have called you if I had known you were in town. But I didn't know you were in town back in the day, and that's why I didn't call you. So now I regret that, or we have a fight over it, something like that. Okay, sentence number 2. She would have divorced him 10 years ago if. She would have divorced him 10 years ago if. Think about it, positive necessary. Here's my answer. She would have divorced him 10 years ago if she had known that he cheated on her. Okay? She didn't know. She gave him a lot of chances, but he blew them all. And, she should have divorced him before. Remember this example, we'll talk about it more later. Okay? One more example in this exercise, one more sentence. And let's start with this one. If we had had more time in Paris, if we had had more time in Paris, pause it, think about it. Here's my idea. If we had had more time in Paris, we would have seen more of the city. But we only came for like a day. We had like a long layover. So we only got to see the Eiffel Tower and that's it. But if we had had more time in Paris, we would have seen more of it. Okay. And let's look at the last example here. Okay. This one. If the neighbor hadn't called the police, if the neighbor hadn't called the police, pause it, think about it. Here's my answer. If the neighbor hadn't called the police, he would have killed somebody. He would have killed somebody, right? So thankfully, the neighbor did call the police and he didn't call anybody. But if the neighbor hadn't called the police, then he would have killed somebody. See, there's this opposition, like it's opposite. The reality is opposite to what could have happened. Okay, super. Now, in this next exercise, I'm going to give you a situation that took place in the past. Now you're looking back in the past and you either regret it or you make somebody regret it because you cannot change anything about the past anymore. Let me give you an example. Sam didn't get up early. He didn't get up early and he was late for work as a result. Now you're telling him, if you had gotten up early, you wouldn't have been late for work. But you didn't, and you were late for work. All right? Okay, so here's the next sentence, the next situation. We didn't bring our umbrellas, and we got wet. Again, take your time, pause it if necessary, come back, I'll give you the right answer. So we didn't bring our umbrellas, we got wet. If we had brought our umbrellas, we wouldn't have gotten wet. Or we wouldn't have gotten wet if we had brought in our umbrellas, right? Brought in, funny. Number 3, Jake didn't study. He failed the test. So what do we say? Positive necessary? He wouldn't have failed the test if he had studied. Okay? Let's move on. The next sentence. I rode the bicycle. I fell off and I broke my arm. Ouch. I wouldn't have broken my arm if I hadn't fell off the bicycle which I was riding. Cool, huh? Okay, the next one. Kevin got lost. He cried. He wouldn't have cried if he hadn't gotten lost. Okay, and one last sentence. That was a funny joke. I laughed. So pause it for a second, think about it. Here's the answer. I wouldn't have laughed if it hadn't been a funny joke. A very heavy construction, but it works. You're talking about regrets or possible regrets in the past because something did happen in the past. All right? Now let's do something fun. Like we already mentioned that conditional 3 is very heavy. It's very difficult to remember all these little details and use it correctly. So in spoken English specifically, we can just cut it in half and use the result part because we understand that the first part is implied. We know what we're talking about. We also mentioned before that would can be substituted by what? By should or by might and may, by other modal verbs, right? And so should is about giving advice, might or may is about like a possibility, different extent of possibility. So we can give it a little different taste if necessary. So here's a situation. We're going to play around with that situation. Imagine you and your friend, you guys work in the same company. Somebody left, and your friend has a great chance to be promoted. Now, in order for him to be promoted, he has to have the gut and come to the boss and talk to the boss about it. Now, the boss is not a super happy person, so next Friday, he's going to celebrate his birthday and he invited everybody. So you're telling your friend, hey, bro, on that Friday, come up to him and ask him about that promotion. Okay? Now, the birthday party happened. So it's a Monday morning now, right? And you're asking your friend, so did you get your promotion? Tell me. And he says, no, I didn't. There's something to regret. Yes, because something happened in the past. And again, you can scold your friend a little bit and use a classical thing. I would have talked to him if I had been there. I would have talked to him. You see, because you're so confident about yourself that you would have had the gut to go and talk to him. So you tell him, you know. So the friend feels terrible. Now, you can use should instead. Let's look at these two examples. It's like, hey, bro, you should have talked to him. You've missed the chance. You should have talked to him. So you kind of scold him again. You make him regret things even more. And he didn't talk to him. He was shy, but he should have done that. He should have done that, but you didn't. Bummer. Now imagine if your friend was a little shy and he got a couple of glasses of wine to feel the courage to come up to the boss. And he came up to him and he said, you stupid idiot, I never liked you, and so on and so forth. And the boss was like, get out of my face. So you hear that story from your friend, you go nuts and you tell him, you shouldn't have talked to him like that. You shouldn't have talked to him like that. But it's too late to change anything. So you're kind of giving him a piece of advice, a piece of your mind, but what does it matter? It's too late. So you should have done that in case he didn't do something, or you shouldn't have done this in case he did something. Okay. So that's how you can play around with should. Now, let's talk about may or might. In some grammars, they're equal. In American grammar, as far as I remember, may is more likely than might. So might is even a lower possibility. Whatever floats your boat, do whatever you like. So imagine that your friend was saying, but he was always surrounded by all these people. He just didn't pay attention to what was around him. So I couldn't have talked to him. I couldn't have talked to him. Could a possibility. I couldn't have talked to him. He was surrounded by people. Like what? How could have I done it? Like I couldn't have done it. And you tell her, well, you might have talked to him when you were sitting at the same table with him. You might have done it. You see, the possibility was low, but you might have done it. There was a possibility. Okay. So here's the idea. So we use should and shouldn't when we sort of scold our friend because he didn't do something, but should have done something, or he did something, but shouldn't have done something. He could have done something, like we're giving him some ideas of like, oh, you could have just tapped him on his shoulder. You could have told him a joke. You could have just asked him straight and directly in his face, just giving him some ideas. Or you might have talked to him when you were sitting at the same table, just like, hey, how you doing? A possibility. But they're all within conditional three, these examples. Past modals is sort of a similar structure right here for those of you who are geeks. But again, instead of would, you can use should or could and stuff. So if we go back to like that example with Mary that I gave at the beginning of the video, you said something like, if I had seen Mary, I would have hugged her, but I didn't see her, I didn't hug her. Or you tell somebody, if you had seen Mary, you should have hugged her. Remember, you had hurt her before, so you should have hugged her. You should have told her that you were sorry, but you didn't. It's like, or if you had seen Mary, you could have given her flowers. You couldn't have given her some candy to make up to her. So, a lot of opportunities, a lot of great ideas. You can add different seasonings and make it taste differently. But you stay within the frame of conditional three. I hope it helps, guys. So let us recap. We will compare the three conditionals once again. So conditional one, it's a real conditional. You talk about the future. You already have a plan. And if you meet this specific condition, you will execute your plan, right? And we use a present tense, like if I win the lottery, I will buy a house. We use a future tense, or I'm going to buy, and so on and so forth. So again, watch the first video about conditional one if you want to. Now, conditional two, if I won a lottery, I would buy a house. So it means that you don't even have a ticket in your hands. You're just dreaming, speculating, hoping for the best and preparing for the worst. So this is a non-real condition. You're still talking about the future, like talking about like a possibility in the future, but you understand that nobody ever wins lotteries and stuff like that. Unlike conditional two, conditional three talks about the past. So something did happen in the past. Something did happen and you cannot turn it around. You cannot change the past. For example, if I had won the lottery, I would have bought a house. But I didn't win the lottery and I didn't buy a house in the past. So everything remains in the past and you're just regretting it right now. So I hope it's clear, and there is one more exercise that I want to leave with you. And in this specific exercise, I will give you 10 sentences, and in the parentheses, you will find certain verbs that you would have to use. Now, what I'd like you to do with each of the sentences, make up conditional one, conditional two, and conditional three. For example, if you see the first sentence, it goes like this: if you study for the test, comma, you pass it. All right. So conditional one, if you study for the test, you will pass it. For advanced student, if you study for the test, you're going to pass it. You give it more percentage, higher percentage here, right? Now, conditional two, if you study for the test, you would pass it. Now, there was no test yet. You're just sitting there and thinking like, well, how do I pass a test? Like I have to study for it. So if I studied, I would pass it, just hoping. And then in conditional three, if you had studied for the test, you would have passed it. But you're such a loser that didn't study and thus you didn't pass. Okay, so take a moment, look at these 10 sentences, pause the video, and play around with them. Okay, and again, if you didn't see my videos about conditional one, conditional two, present perfect, quantifiers, you can always go to my page and do this. All right, now a little bit of announcements for the future. So we talked about conditional one, conditional two, conditional three. How about mixed conditionals? Do you know that you can mix conditional 2 and conditional 3, and it makes it even more fun. So for those of you who are geeks, I'll record another video pretty soon. And now, off to the exercise, and I will see you later.